A bearded man passed through airport security with luggage filled with weapons. Security personnel clearly saw the contents on surveillance but turned a blind eye. After receiving a phone call, she left her post citing illness. The bearded man successfully boarded a Dubai to London flight with the weapons. During the flight, a girl in a red dress discovered a bullet in the restroom. Panicked, she returned to her seat and showed the bullet to her companion. Samir, a white-haired man, noticed the girl's distress and approached her. She told him about finding the bullet. Upon seeing it, Samir looked uneasy. He reassured the girl not to make a scene and promised to report it to the crew. But Samir actually sought out his accomplice, the bearded man. It turned out the bullet was accidentally left behind by the hijackers in the lavatory. The hijackers decided to execute their plan early. The bearded man then handed Samir a green hat as the signal for the operation. After Samir put on the hat, the lurking hijackers moved simultaneously. They entered the lavatory, retrieved pistols, and loaded bullets. 5 hijackers swiftly took control of the entire cabin. The hijackers used the flight attendant's intercom to demand passengers remain quiet. They confiscated all passengers' communication devices. A crew member secretly reported the hijacking to the cockpit. After confirming the hijack via surveillance, the captain immediately contacted Dubai ground control. However, the hijackers possessed all crew member information. They brought a flight attendant to the cockpit door. The hijackers accurately stated the hotel information of the captain and a flight attendant. To protect his lover, the captain struck the first officer who tried to stop him, then opened the cockpit door. The hijackers forced the captain to report to ground control that it was a drunken disturbance. After ground control lifted the alert, the hijackers shut down the aircraft's network. Passenger Sam Nelson seized the opportunity to send a text to his ex-wife, "I'll definitely come back safely." It turned out Sam Nelson was a negotiation expert. He calmly observed the hijackers' movements and voluntarily handed over his phone. He accurately stated the flight details and analyzed the hijackers' modus operandi. Sam Nelson pointed out that the hijackers had coerced security personnel to bring weapons aboard. He offered to assist them but demanded guarantees for his own safety. The hijackers found this astonishing and immediately checked his passport. Finding nothing unusual, Sam Nelson continued, "The white-haired accomplice in the floral shirt rushing to find you earlier clearly means some unexpected event forced your plan to advance. With over 5 hours left before this flight lands, you must ensure nothing goes wrong." 2 brave passengers in the rear rows pulled wires from their seats, stuffed golf balls into socks, and attempted to resist with makeshift weapons. They were quickly subdued and beaten by the hijackers. Sam Nelson picked up a dropped pistol but voluntarily returned it to the hijackers, earning their trust. Sam Nelson wrote a note warning the hijackers about the captain's potential danger. He explained that the captain only handled takeoff and landing, with the plane operating on autopilot during the flight. If left in the cockpit, the captain could potentially steer the plane anywhere. The hijackers then located the captain and confirmed Sam Nelson's information. They removed him from the cockpit and isolated him. Sam Nelson established a secret communication channel with the captain using the in-seat entertainment system. Through their exchanges, the captain devised a plan to send a distress signal via Iraqi air traffic control. As the plane entered Iraqi airspace, ground control initiated communication requests. Shortly after, the hijackers were forced to allow the captain to respond to avoid triggering military intervention. During the call, the captain covertly altered the flight path to send a coded message. Dubai air staff detected the abnormal route deviation and coordinated an investigation. They discovered a security officer and her husband murdered in the lavatory. The third deviation from the flight path confirmed their suspicion. The plane was sending a distress signal. Inside the cabin, an elderly couple's argument caught Sam Nelson's attention. A girl fluent in Arabic translated that the old man had recognized the hijackers using blank cartridges. The curly-haired man risked verifying this by finding no shell casings in the cabin. A female passenger confirmed the blank cartridge intelligence by turning on a reading light. Sam Nelson still advised caution. Ground control contacted the cockpit again, inquiring about the route deviation. Sensing something was amiss, the hijackers prohibited passengers from using the restroom. After discovering the captain's secret communication, they assaulted him. Sam Nelson intervened to stop the hijackers and protect the captain. The hijackers forced Sam Nelson to smile as they prepared to punish him. Sam Nelson was so terrified his nose began to run. This moment made Sam Nelson decide to take a desperate gamble. He had the girl beside him ask the old man in the rear if he could confirm the gun definitely contained only blanks. Meanwhile, the other crew members realized the people in the rear were searching for bullets. Taking advantage of the hijackers' inattention, they rushed to the back and informed Sam Nelson that shortly after takeoff, the girl in the red dress. The girl found a bullet in the lavatory. Sam Nelson immediately had the elderly passenger draw diagrams of blank and live rounds, then had the girl verify the difference. He informed the hijacker that it was time to serve meals to passengers and hoped the hijacker would agree. They would immediately prepare food for the passengers. Without hesitation, the hijacker refused outright. The flight attendant persisted, using her 15 years of experience to warn him that trouble would arise as passengers grew increasingly hungry and thirsty. The hijacker leader permitted only 1 bottle of water per person. She seized the moment to pass a note to her male colleague. The flight attendant pretended to deliver water while handing the note to the girl, instructing her to confirm the bullet's type. If it was at A, no action was needed. If it was at B, she should activate the overhead reading light. The flight attendant quickly covered for her colleague. The girl in red successfully retrieved the blueprint. The flight attendant then signaled to her male colleague that something was amiss behind her. He approached the girl and
You sure?
Yeah, we're all sure. Aren't we, Gus?
he made his way to the rear of the cabin, finding an opportunity to signal to Sam Nelson. The team confirmed it was indeed a blank cartridge. From here on, things would take a different turn. Back on the ground, the sharp-eyed Alice noticed the plane was sending distress signals. She urgently contacted Hara from the counterterrorism unit. Hara was Detective Daniel's ex-girlfriend, the current boyfriend of Sam Nelson's ex-wife. Daniel had previously contacted Hara, but no flight anomalies were detected then. Now Alice firmly informed Hara that all signs pointed to Flight 29 being hijacked. Hara promptly briefed her superiors and convened a multi-department video conference. She recounted the entire sequence to her colleagues, while Alice earnestly explained her analysis, the pilot's initial danger warning, followed by his retraction. The flight deliberately deviated from its original route, only to abruptly return to its previous path. The angle of this return was unnaturally sharp, clearly indicating a forced, rapid course correction. This abrupt transition angle was highly irregular. Staff verification revealed only 1 passenger with a criminal record Klein, seat 37, released from prison just 3 weeks prior. Yet 1 person couldn't hijack an entire aircraft. The investigation stalled. That's when Hara remembered her ex-boyfriend, a police officer. With no other options, she sought his help. He sent the confidential list to Daniel, who discovered that among the 216 passengers, 5 were not registered in any national database. Daniel couldn't explain why their passports were valid. Hara urgently reported to her superiors. On the plane, Sam Nelson and Curly discussed first subduing the weakest hijacker. Just then, a passenger disregarded the hijacker's warnings and stood up to fetch medicine for his uncle. The hijacker immediately beat him senseless. Sam Nelson signaled Hugo that the moment had come and urged him to help subdue the white-haired hijacker. But Hugo's legs suddenly gave out. Sam Nelson had to act alone. He quietly moved to the rear cabin, pulled open a drawer. He smacked the silver-haired man across the face, knocking his pistol loose. Just then, another passenger rushed over to help Sam Nelson subdue the silver-haired man. Unexpectedly, the old man proved to be incredibly strong, and neither of them could overpower him. The silver-haired man picked up his pistol and aimed it at Sam Nelson. Meanwhile, the hijacker's leader had stormed into the rear cabin.
So go on then. Pull the fucking trigger. Pull the fucking trigger.
The hijackers, to intimidate everyone, had actually shot and killed a female passenger. Terror gripped the entire cabin. Sam Nelson was bound by the hijackers just as the plane reached Romanian airspace. Ground crew continuously contacted the captain to confirm the aircraft's safety. Enraged, the hijackers smashed the headset and tossed it aside. Marks confronted the leader, demanding why he had killed someone. The leader explained that killing one would intimidate the rest, as he couldn't control every passenger. Notice Mark's abdominal wound. The leader ordered him to bandage it immediately. Marks, to the rear cabin, removed his shirt. Blood was already flowing freely. The flight attendant alone couldn't properly bandage the wound. For Sam Nelson to be released to assist together to dress the wound. Marks began to lose consciousness from blood loss. Sam Nelson urged Marks, before dialing, opened his ex-wife's cloud mailbox. Sam Nelson then dialed Marks's mother's number. At that moment, ground control in the UK discovered 2 fighter jets approaching the aircraft. This meant the plane could be shot down at any moment, and the 216 innocent passengers aboard would become the hijackers' collateral damage. The hijackers also spotted the fighter jets outside the window and immediately threatened the passengers to close all window shades. Ground personnel attempted to contact the airport again and issued a warning. If there was no response, they would shoot down the plane. One of the female hijackers began to panic. But the hijackers' leader confidently told her this was a flight bound for Britain, and everyone on board was British. Shooting it down would mean declaring war on Britain. The hijackers believed this small country wouldn't dare. Two bound passengers, seemingly smarter than the hijackers, told the flight attendant that the fighter jets weren't there to rescue them, but to stop them, meaning the plane would be shot down as soon as it approached Romania's capital. The flight attendant immediately stood up and went to the window, trying to signal to the fighter jets outside that they were hijacked. But she was quickly spotted by the hijackers. At this moment, the captain also grasped the gravity of the situation and urgently told the hijackers, "We must communicate with the fighter jets outside." The hijackers demanded to know why. They dragged the captain into the cockpit. Just as the captain was about to contact the fighter pilots, he discovered his headset was broken. Meanwhile, embassy personnel kept trying to communicate with Romanian staff, insisting the plane posed no threat to Romania. But the Romanian government couldn't risk gambling with the capital's safety. Meanwhile, Sam's ex-wife, who was taking the bus home, received a voice message from Sam Nelson and immediately forwarded it to his police boyfriend. Daniel Markson on the plane was in critical condition. The child's father immediately identified himself as a doctor. After examination, Sam Nelson was struggling to breathe and urgently needed a chest puncture to assist his breathing. Sam Nelson snatched the pen tube and forcefully stabbed it into Markson's chest. Marks finally began breathing again, and the hijacker beside him also breathed a sigh of relief. But they remained unaware the plane had been locked onto by fighter jets. In 60 seconds, the aircraft would be shot down. At that moment, Daniel confirmed via the voice message's phone number that the hijackers were British. Their target was the UK, posing no threat to Romania. The embassy staff urgently relayed this information to their Romanian counterparts. Staff urgently relayed this information to Romanian officials. Just as the pilot was about to activate the transmitter, the intercom suddenly broadcast an order to halt the attack. The 200 passengers on board narrowly escaped disaster. But what was the hijackers' ultimate goal? No one knew what dangers lay ahead. The hijackers' leader came to the rear of the cabin. After confirming the man in the yellow shirt was a doctor, he ordered the others to leave the cabin. But just as Sam Nelson was about to be let out, a hijacker lying on the floor uttered a phrase that caught Sam's attention.
I found Mom.
Returning to his seat, Sam Nelson sketched a flag with a pen and asked the person beside him which country it represented. The girl next to him informed him it was Hungary. At that moment, Sam Nelson seemed to have another idea. Simultaneously, officials at the British embassy received a threat from the terrorists demanding the release of 2 imprisoned drug cartel leaders. If their demands weren't met, the 216 passengers on board would have no chance of survival. Sam Nelson deduced from the hijackers' final words in the cabin that the leader and the wounded hijacker were brothers. He approached the leader and informed him his brother wouldn't survive another hour. They must land immediately for medical treatment or the brother would die. To verify Sam's claim, the hijacker immediately turned and walked toward the rear cabin. Sam Nelson urgently instructed a nearby flight attendant to call the doctor in the rear cabin and relay the coded message. The doctor had just hung up when the hijacker entered.
How long's he got? Less than I know.
The squad leader, desperate to save his brother, the hijacker led the captain to the cockpit to prepare for landing. Since the destination country was Hungary and only the first officer knew Hungarian, the hijacker permitted only the first officer to operate the aircraft and communicate with ground control, which was precisely Sam's plan. This way, they could communicate and coordinate with ground personnel using Hungarian. Under the hijacker's watch, the co-pilot contacted ground staff. After a series of coded exchanges, Hungary agreed to the landing, and armed forces arrived at the airport, preparing to rescue the hostages on board. The 2 rear hijackers grew unusually tense upon learning of the impending landing. Even the younger brother lying on the floor shook his head, signaling refusal to land. The doctor, seeing this, was baffled. Clearly, landing would save his life, so why did he resist? The white-haired hijacker rushed to the rear cabin, threatening the doctor to assure the leader his brother was safe and landing unnecessary. Sam Nelson arrived just then. The hijacker ordered Sam Nelson to prevent the landing. It turned out the terrorists on the ground had everyone under their control. They even possessed Sam's family information. 2 terrorists had already infiltrated his ex-wife's home. The 2 criminals quietly opened the door, slowly walked into the living room, and opened the case they carried. Inside lay a pistol. This scene was witnessed by Sam's son upstairs, who instantly realized the danger. The terrorists also spotted someone upstairs and immediately charged upward. At this moment, Sam Nelson fully grasped how terrifying these hijackers were. If he insisted on landing the plane, It could endanger his wife and child. Sam Nelson confronted the hijackers again, insisting the plane couldn't land. The hijackers instantly lost their temper. "You were the one who ordered the landing," they snapped. "Now you say it can't land?" Sam Nelson explained it was his brother who refused to land the plane. When the hijackers reached the rear cabin, they found his brother had already pulled the pen out of his chest and died quietly. The hijackers were overcome with grief at the sight of his dead brother, but there was nothing they could do. They had to accept this reality. Sam Nelson then called the cockpit crew to stop the landing. Everyone seemed compelled to follow Sam's orders. The co-pilot reluctantly aborted the landing, and the plane returned to its original route. Suddenly, turned out there was more than one group of hijackers on board. Even the leader was stunned. Time rewound to an hour earlier. The bearded leader received a message from the ground demanding he immediately kill a passenger and send the victim's photo back. The hijackers had no choice but to comply. Just as they prepared to strangle the flight attendants with a belt, Sam Nelson appeared in time to warn the hijackers. They had already killed one passenger. There was no need to harm more innocent people. At that moment, the hijackers recalled the female passenger who had been shot earlier. They ordered the crew to take a photo and send it back to the ground. The person demanding the photo was none other than the recently released. The crew released the two criminal leaders as demanded, even preparing a car and phones for them. As they fled in the vehicle, Daniel and his colleagues quietly tailed the criminals in their own car. But the criminals weren't fools either. They knew the police would try this. The criminal leader stopped midway, handed his phone to Daniel, and warned him that continuing the pursuit would only cost more lives on the plane. As he spoke, Daniel received the photos. He immediately forwarded them to embassy staff, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Upon seeing the victim's photo, the embassy personnel looked panicked. Confirmation revealed she was indeed a passenger on Flight 29. This passenger was a speech therapist who had just secured a new job. Meanwhile, Sam Nelson devised a new plan to unite the passengers in a coordinated resistance against the hijackers. Sam Nelson passed a yogurt container marked with a special code from the front of the cabin to the rear. Everyone began preparing to fight back, searching for suitable weapons. During their escape, the two criminals were unexpectedly blocked by roadblocks. The hijackers then demanded the police immediately clear the roadblocks, threatening to kill more passengers if their demands weren't met. But after waiting a long time, the roadblocks remained. Losing patience, the two criminals immediately ordered the hijackers on the plane to kill another passenger. Just as the bearded hijacker was about to shoot a female passenger, Sam Nelson tackled him to the ground. The two wrestled violently. Meanwhile, a woman in white rose went to the restroom, retrieved a pistol from her bag, checked the magazine, and chambered a round. She then swiftly entered the cockpit. The sound of gunfire instantly silenced everyone. This stunned the hijackers. Sam Nelson asked the hijacker if the pilot was one of their own. The hijacker claimed he didn't know her. By then, passengers had begun resisting. Several passengers in the middle of the cabin overpowered the white-haired hijacker and seized his pistol. Realizing he couldn't kill every passenger, the hijacker reluctantly handed over the gun to Sam Nelson. The passengers who rushed forward were extremely agitated. Ignoring Sam's attempts to stop them, they insisted on confronting the hijacker, even firing warning shots at Sam Nelson. But, unexpectedly, the gun in the passenger's hand was unloaded. Sam Nelson informed the other passengers that the hijacking crisis was over. But they now faced a bigger problem. The woman in white in the cockpit was adjusting the flight path. Her mission was to crash the plane in London. Sam Nelson guessed the hijacker's intent in the cockpit and tried to communicate with him over the phone. The hijacker immediately ripped the phone cord out, denying Sam Nelson any chance to speak. Meanwhile, embassy staff concluded this wasn't a simple hijacking. Some mastermind was orchestrating a crash to crash airline stocks. They could reap enormous profits from it. Thus, the hijackers' ultimate goal was to crash the plane. Daniel called Sam's son to confirm his safety, but Sam's son had already been taken hostage by the hijackers. Sam's son used a secret code to warn Daniel he was in grave danger. After hanging up, Daniel immediately called his colleagues, demanding they send reinforcements immediately. Daniel calmly knocked on the door and informed the hijackers that a fire had broken out in the building, ordering everyone to evacuate immediately. As everyone fled, the hijackers had no choice but to follow. They were immediately subdued by ambushing armed police upon exiting the building. Sam's son was successfully rescued. Ground staff member Alice contacted Sam Nelson, who informed her the plane remained under hijackers' control. The hijacker was a mother. He would attempt to negotiate with the hijacker. Meanwhile, two fighter jets were already on standby, ready to shoot down the plane if necessary to prevent it from crashing into the city center. Alice desperately explained to embassy staff, pleading for them to give Sam Nelson a chance. Persuaded by Alice, the officials temporarily withdrew the fighter jets. The two released prisoners fled to a dilapidated courtyard. Bald man, intent on driving down the airline's stock price, deliberately withheld the crash order from the hijackers on the plane. The other hijacker grew increasingly impatient watching the bald man delay issuing the crash order. One of his henchmen killed the bald man. With no response forthcoming, the hijackers on the plane had no choice but to continue flying. Meanwhile, Sam Nelson persistently tried to communicate with the hijackers and eventually discovered their cell phone. The hijacker had a daughter. Sam Nelson deduced the hijacking was also a hostage situation. He relentlessly appealed to the hijackers' emotions, showing him footage of his daughter via the monitor and insisting she wouldn't want him to do this. After Sam's persistent pleading, the hijacker finally wavered. He called Sam Nelson himself, revealing his daughter was being held hostage. If he didn't comply, she would die. Sam Nelson countered that these hijackers were inhumane and would kill her daughter regardless. Sam Nelson told the hijacker that the passengers were innocent victims. At least he still had a chance to save the lives of the 200 people on board. Seeing the captain's family photo, the hijacker's resolve finally wavered. He then called Sam Nelson back, permitting only him to enter the cockpit. Sam Nelson made his way to the cockpit and called Alice again. They needed her cooperation to land the plane. By then, the fuel was exhausted. The engines were about to shut down, and the woman in white was losing control. To steady her, Sam Nelson pleaded with ground personnel to promise no charges if the plane landed. They would not pursue charges against him. Just then, embassy officials informed Sam Nelson that if the woman was genuinely coerced, they would grant him immunity. The white-clad woman's emotions began to settle as the plane prepared to land. Flight attendants loudly instructed everyone to fasten their seatbelts. At that moment, the aircraft's electrical power failed, plunging the cabin into complete darkness. Panic immediately spread among the passengers. Then an elderly gentleman stepped forward.
We've held this together for 7 hours. Let's stick together now.
Under Alice's guidance, Sam Nelson and the others began operating. As the plane descended, everyone watched the screen nervously. The aircraft grew closer to the ground. Pre-positioned ambulances and fire trucks arrived promptly. The flight attendant opened the cabin door, and all passengers safely exited. Sam Nelson returned to the cabin to retrieve his belongings. Just then, the cabin door slammed shut. He discovered the bearded hijacker had broken free from his handcuffs and vanished. The pistol from the cockpit had also disappeared. Realizing danger, Sam Nelson hid in a concealed spot. He ambushed the hijacker when he wasn't looking. Just then, police stormed in and subdued the hijacker. As the last passenger on board, Sam Nelson safely returned to the ground.